Hello, on this very difficult, tragic, dark day, and welcome to this webinar on the situation in Israel. I'm Shira Hutt, the Executive Vice President at the Jewish Federations of North America, and in a moment, I'll turn it over to my friend Bel Yoeli, the Chief Advocacy Officer at AJC. Yesterday was without a doubt one of the blackest days in Israel's history. We are now tragically hearing that there are over 700 dead, over 2,000 injured, and shockingly, some 150 held hostage in Gaza. At difficult times like these, especially without an endpoint in sight, it's critical that we come together as a community with strength, faith, and resilience. And we have no doubt that we will all do what is necessary fully and completely without hesitation or delay. Today's webinar is a powerful example of our community coming together, and we are grateful to all of the partners and their networks who have joined us today. We want to welcome Hillel, the Network for Jewish Human Service Agencies, Honeymoon Israel, A Wider Bridge, Young Judea in Canada, the J-Pro Network, 18 Doors, the Shine a Light Network, Leading Edge, CAM, JCPA, Hadassah, NCJW, the Brandeis Institute, Project Shema, Stand With Us, and there's likely other networks represented here. Thank you all for being here with us today. Before we proceed, and I turn it over to Bel, please allow us to show you a very short and difficult message from a civilian and mother who lives in Israel's south and whose two sons were dragged from their home by Hamas terrorists yesterday and are now believed to be kept hostage inside Gaza. As I mentioned, it's difficult to watch, but also captures a small part of this moment.
There's no sound on the video. Quickly start again with sound.
Were sleeping in their beds. They were taken out of their beds by terrorists who broke into my house, broke the house, broke the door, and took them. I was on the phone with my youngest. I wasn't home at the time. And all I could hear is him begging them not to take him because he's too young. I'm begging you all mothers of all places in the world, help me find my sons and return them home. They are just kids. These terrorists took hundreds of kids, elderly people, people with disabilities. They are terrorists. They are cruel. They have no morals. I always tell my kids that the kids in the Gaza border are suffering much more than they do. But right now, I'm not sure my morals are in place. Please, please help me find them and return them home as soon as possible. It's not their war, and even war has rules.
Over to you, Bel.
Thank you, Shira. Hello, everyone. Obviously, it's hard to speak and hold back our tears after that heartbreaking video and all of the content, awful content that we are seeing coming out of what's happening in Israel. Shira covered all of our partners who are here. We want to thank all of you for being with us. The purpose of this call is to give everyone in our community as much information as possible and to discuss what's happening in Israel from the multiple angles that we think you need to hear in order to understand the depth and breadth of what's happening and how our community can respond. And we know that there are many, many Zoom calls happening from many organizations. It's a big Jewish community, a big alphabet soup, but we're all here to try to get one coordinated call as much as possible. And that's what you're seeing. And that's what AJC, JFNA, our partners, are trying to do here. We're going to jump right in. We have a lot to get through. Just want to give you a quick lineup of what's to come. We're going to start with our AJC's director of our Jerusalem office, Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich. We're going to hear from Naomi Adler, CEO of Hadassah, Yaakov Katz, journalist and former editor-in-chief of Jerusalem Post, Ted Deutsch, CEO of American Jewish Committee, Eric Fingerhut, CEO of JFNA, and Rabbi David Wolpe. If we were going to do our best to take questions, we'll get to as many as we can. And with that, we're going to jump right in. Avital, please join us on the screen. welcome. I know you are on reserve duty in the north. Thank you so much for being with us. We're very grateful for all that you're doing. Avital, in the brief time that we have, please tell our audience what they need to know, what's happening on the ground, and the key messages you want to share with everyone who's listening.
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. First, let me just apologize for speaking to all of you from the car. I'm in the base right now in the north, 2 miles from the Lebanese border, and I can't bring cellular device inside the building. So that's why I'm in the car. I think that there are a few things which are very important for you to know. First of all, we have been through numerous operations in Gaza. This is not an operation. This is a war. We have never been in a similar situation in the past. Yes, we were surprised. We are not investigating the reasons why we're surprised at this point of time, but yes, we were surprised. Hundreds of terrorists stormed and breached the Israeli borders from the air with paragliders, from the sea with boats, and from the land with motorcycles and vehicles. And they had one goal: to kidnap and murder as many Israelis as possible. They entered more than 20 communities. Some were not adjacent to the border with Gaza. Some were 7 kilometers away from the border. And they went from one house to another and knocked on the doors, or tried to break the doors, armed, and butcher the people. There is no really better description than what I've been seeing. It's butchering women, children, whole families, elderly, those who stayed alive. Many of them were kidnapped. The numbers that you're hearing now on the media, the official numbers, are not the final numbers. We have many, many casualties. The numbers right now, the official numbers are around 700, but the numbers will unfortunately increase. We have hundreds of people which were taken hostage in Gaza. And as you know, there is no Red Cross in Gaza. There are no UN representatives in Gaza except UNRWA, which deals with welfare and medicine and not with human rights. There are more than 2,200 wounded in hospitals all over the country. And there's a lot of uncertainty regarding other fronts here in the country. Early today, 6:40, I came to the base at 5 a.m. In 6:40, there was a barrage of mortars that was fired by Hezbollah to the IDF outposts here in the border. Now, Iran is pulling the strings. You've probably remember that a month ago in Beirut, there was a meeting of top leaderships of terror groups around us. Keep in mind that Hamas does not only stay in Gaza, but they're in other countries, in Qatar, in Turkey, and in Lebanon. There's actually Hamas Lebanon. They're active, they're operational. Iran is pressuring Hamas to act. Iran is funding Hamas, is training the people. Those hundreds of terrorists, and by the way, now as I'm speaking to you, there are still 6 communities in Israel with ongoing fire exchange with terrorists on the ground. The people, the terrorists on the ground, are very well armed and equipped. And someone needs to pay for this equipment and the guns and the weapons and the bullets. And we have to ask ourselves, what is the source of the funding? And the funding is Iranian funding. And there are other sources as well, but this is the key funding. Now, how do you train these people? How do they know how to collect intelligence and which communities to attack? And how to do it, in which areas in defense? So they have been trained. There's intelligence information sharing between the terror groups, unfortunately. And today we are seeing many hundreds of families which are looking for their missing loved ones, searching hospitals. By the way, you can understand that more than 2,000 people that are wounded cannot be confined to 2 hospitals in southern Israel, but they're all over the country. So these parents, these families are searching for their loved ones in hospitals, and when they cannot find them there, they're going to a missing person center that was opened yesterday evening near Ben Gurion Airport, providing DNA and other materials. So that is where we are right now. I think that it's premature to discuss hostage situation and prisoner exchange. I think that Israel realizes that we do have a lot of support from the international community, but first and foremost from the US. We understand that there is help on the way. There is a flying, an aircraft carrier on the way. There is Iron Dome particles which are on their way as well. So we do feel the support here, but the sense of uncertainty is huge. The entire country is under an emergency situation, which has some consequences according to the law. For example, the capability to recruit a huge number of reservists. And just to end with a very short prism to my own personal story. I've been recruited to the reserve yesterday. I've been here, I'm sleeping here. As I told you, I'm 2 miles away from the Lebanese border. My home is 2.5 hours drive south of here. My son is in the army as well. Since he cannot communicate with me with the phone, then his commanders opened a WhatsApp group for the parents. So they are able to communicate with us because it's an emergency situation. And my husband is is working in an emergency group dealing with the Iron Dome. So I have two daughters at home on their own, and we are, you can say, a recruited family. There are many families like my story. And I do think that right now people are united in this tragedy we're experiencing. I want to thank you for your support for Israel, for the Israeli people, and I'll stop now.
Thank you so much, Avital, for everything that you're doing, for joining us. I know we could ask many more questions. And as you said, we're all with you and deeply affected by what's happening. We're standing with you. With that, I want to bring in Naomi from Hadassah. Naomi, thank you so much for joining us. I want to hear from you the medical update on the ground, what's happening from Hadassah's point of view. We're hearing a lot about blood shortages and damage to hospitals. Please give us your insights on what's happening.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here in unfortunate circumstances. I'm Naomi Adler, Hadassah's CEO, and I greatly appreciate this opportunity and others to provide an update on the medical situation in Israel on the ground for all of you. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Hadassah, we are the largest Jewish women's organization in the country. In addition, we founded and continue to own and support the Hadassah Medical Organization in Israel. That includes 2 major hospitals located in Jerusalem and Kerem and Mount Scopus, and other clinics in Israel. We continue to proudly be an island of peace, employing and treating people from across the spectrum of the Israeli society. That includes secular and religious Jews, Muslims, Israeli Arabs, and those Palestinians from the West Bank who can make it to work or need to be treated. Our hospitals treat all who come from our care, regardless of religion, ethnicity, nationality. And our staff really do, right now, continue to work shoulder to shoulder without visible conflict. We've been working really hard to make sure that our staff is supported in this. And that is one way, if you are in connection with anyone in the medical profession, that you can be supportive of their work. In a minute, I'm going to address other things that you could do. But before that, I want to give you some context. I know you've heard about who's died. I know you've heard that there are so many thousands who have been injured, according to Israel's health ministries. At Hadassah, we are seeing the most serious cases. And just to let everyone know, we run the only US owned Israel hospital network. So we are very close to our American partners as well as our Israeli partners when it comes to overseeing and helping every hospital in Israel, but in particular, the tier 1 hospitals, which coordinate with other trauma hospitals to accept the most seriously injured so that we have access for them at the highest level of surgery and ICU facilities from everyone from preemies to the elderly who are now currently being treated there. Most of the patients have come through airlift and other transfers from the south and from a little bit of the center of the country, vascular surgery, cardiothoracic, orthopedic head trauma, etc. And I'll give you a couple stories that you can use to describe the situation in a moment. Overall, the situation in the hospital is stable. The doctors and nurses and everyone who is there as janitorial and cafeteria staff, they're all there. They haven't left. They're working incredibly hard, shoulder to shoulder. About 20% of our nurses are from the Palestinian population, and those who were there at the beginning continue to remain. Many of them have not gone home. We have not been able to get a lot of our staff who wasn't there at the beginning from the West Bank into the hospital, and we're hoping that that will change at some point. As of very early this morning, and we really only do this kind of counting at the beginning of the day, we have been treating 58 casualties with 15 in the ICU. Many of them are seriously wounded. About 90% are IDF soldiers. And that's in Enkerem. And at Hadassah Mount Scopus, the number keeps changing. We're now at 7. Tragically, today, 2 of the casualties have died. The medical organization has created an emergency phone line for inquiries. So in addition to the missing persons line you heard about, they are answering questions all day, every day, and actively engaged in securing blood donations. If you know anyone who can get close to Enkerem or Mount Scopus and give blood, we need it. As of now, we are not seeking volunteer staff, although we may. We're not sure what's going to happen with the staffing. We're sort of doing this day by day, but we know that there may be a request for nurses, doctors, and other staff to help keep the hospital running. As of now, all the department heads, not 65 of them, are on site. And as I said, some of the Palestinian physicians and nurses have been unable to make it. Despite that, every ward is fully staffed. And we are only accepting emergency cases. We've canceled all regular clinics and elective surgeries. We are continuously receiving waves of the wounded, and we will continue to do so, although we are still treating those with dialysis needs, oncology, and IVF, because fertility is part of the positive part of life that we continue to maintain at HMO. In addition, Hadassah owns youth villages and works with many other youth villages, which you may know house and educate youth at risk and some orphans. They have been ready since the Ukrainian outbreak to accept Ukrainian refugees. And just today, one of the youth villages down south in, I believe, Kfar Saba, just asked Hadassah Norim to take 70 high school students as they needed to evacuate. So I am assuming that that's happening across the youth village network. So those of you who are supportive and care about the youth village network, that's what's going now. Unfortunately, I feel I need to report that one of our Youth Aliyah alums, Officer Alex Posnikov, was killed yesterday. Many of us know those who have been kidnapped or wounded or unfortunately killed. We want to make sure that you know those who are wounded at the hospital, whether they have family there or not. We do have people in the hospital who are visiting patients on a regular basis. At some point, if you're living near that area, we may need those volunteers as well. 2 examples. We have a lone soldier who I believe is either 18 or 19 years old from Houston, Texas, who enlisted and unfortunately was shot in the face. He has gone through 3 surgeries, I believe, by now. And our own national president, Rhoda Smolow, who's in the hospital now and visiting patients, was able to bring the comfort of everyone to his bedside. And we are trying to make sure that someone is around all the time since he is truly alone.
Naomi,
We
I'm
have-
so sorry because I know we want to hear the rest of examples. We have a couple speakers who have hard time stops because they have to go on other calls. 'Cause there's-
Totally get it. Sorry, but
No,
thank
not
you
at
for
all.
your support.
We're so grateful for the update and thank you so much for all of the work that your organization is doing. And I know your staff must be under an incredible amount of pressure. So please do keep us all updated. And I will want to hear more if there's anything. I think all of us on the call will want to hear more if there's anything we can do to support, whether volunteers or funds or anything else. So thank you so much.
Funds, we have needs just like everyone else. Yeah.
Of course, keep us posted and thank you so much. With that, I'm going to bring on Yaakov Katz. Yaakov, thank you so much for joining us. I know many of us are eager to hear your expertise on what's happening on the ground from your perspective. Please tell everyone watching what are the most important details they need to know about what's happening on the ground and what's to come.
There's a lot to tell, and it's difficult to prioritize probably what's the most important, what's secondary. But I want to try to share a feeling of what's happening here in Israel. I want to take you back for a moment to just before this all began on Saturday morning, Shabbat morning, the morning of Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday here in Israel. My family and I, for example, were in the old city of Jerusalem the night before on Friday night celebrating Dancing with the Torah for this holiday. And we woke up, went to sleep, planning to go to services the following morning to continue the holiday, and wake up instead to sirens and spend the day in bomb shelters. Our daughter, who's 20, went back to her base early down south. She's now training to become an officer. I have a younger brother who's been called up to the reserves and serving up along the Lebanese border, likely near where Avital is, and nephews that are deployed all along the south, fighting against these terrorists. What Israel is facing today is a surreal reality that we probably never thought was possible once again. It is an eerie situation, harrowing. You walk the streets of Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, or anywhere else, empty. Stores are closed. No one is out. Schools are shut. People are afraid to leave the confines of their home, a feeling that something terrible is still around the corner, even though what happened already is unimaginable. The way people were slaughtered in their homes, the way older men, women, babies, children, young women, young men dragged their bodies, mutilated, abused, molested in Gaza by these terrorists. But still something worse seems to be around the corner. I think that right now we're still in that fog of war moment when people are not clear of what's happening. There's a lack of clarity. I would say that also the government is failing its people in a sense. There's no one talking. I'm not talking about Hasbara. I'm not talking about going on CNN or BBC or any of these things. And all you organizations here are doing a fantastic job. But I'm talking about speaking to the Israeli public, telling us what is happening, what to expect, what is coming next, and what should we be prepared for, right? Give some clarity to the people who are still in a state of shock. There's a lot of questions. There are the failures that led to this, and there are three huge ones. How did Israel, its amazing intelligence agencies, which are exalted around the world, we know what Khamenei is having for breakfast in Tehran. We didn't know that 1,000 armed terrorists were going to cross into Israel. How did we fail to learn that? Number two, once we failed there, how did we not fail to stop them with those defensive measures? I'm sure many of you on this call have been to the Gaza border, have seen the sophistication of the defensive measures there. How did that not work? And then when that didn't work, why did it take the IDF so long to get there? But like Avital said, there will be a time for that reckoning. Right now, the priority, clear out the south of the terrorists, prepare the reservists, the tens of thousands, if not more, who have been called up, and then launch that offensive that's coming. Likely a large-scale ground offensive. All indications is that that's what's in the cards. The next priority is we need to keep Gaza contained. The prospect of a war spreading to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and many of you on this call have heard over the years about the growing arsenal that Hezbollah has, the over 150,000 rockets that cover the entire state of Israel with precision, with larger warheads, with greater ranges. We do not want that war, of course. We need to ensure that this can hopefully be contained. And then next will be the hostages. So after all of this that we're about to go through, after everything we saw yesterday, we're still seeing today, the war that will still come and the price that we still pay, there will be the hostages, and we know what Hamas does to hostages. We know how they manipulate them, use them cynically. Then we talk about one, Gilad Shalit, remember? That was one with one set of parents and two siblings. Now imagine 100 with children, with parents, with siblings. It will rip our country's heart out. And so while the pain is now, and the pain will come, that will be pain of weeks, if not months, and God forbid, possibly years, is what Israel's looking forward to. I know that there's been a lot of comparisons to Yom Kippur. 50 years ago, if you look at the English date, the Gregorian date, it was actually the day after, October 6th, 73. And this happened on October 7th. The Jewish date, of course, is about 10 days off or so. The difference between this and Yom Kippur was Yom Kippur, we were surprised. We lacked the intelligence. But that was military against military on the Egyptian front and on the Syrian front. What we saw yesterday was not military against military. This was animals who came in to people's homes and killed them in their beds and their bomb shelters. People terrorists who went after civilians with no remorse. That is the difference between, this is a whole other shock of a whole other level, which is why I actually look at it. And with this, I'll end, is more like an Israeli Pearl Harbor moment. People have also compared it to 9/11, but it's more like Pearl Harbor because we know for years what's going on in Gaza. For 20 years, pretty much, since we pulled out in 2005, the policy of Israel has been a policy of containment. Try to keep it isolated, keep it contained, don't let it explode too much, have rounds of violence every couple of years. We whack them, they whack us, we go back to the way life was. That will not be the possible scenario anymore. What was can no longer be, and Israel will have to flip the equation, and that is because of the atrocities and the magnitude of what happened yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Bel, Avital, Naomi, and Yaakov for giving us a better understanding of what's currently happening on the ground and what it is that we need to understand. We're now going to turn our attention to hearing more about what we can be doing, here in our communities to support Israel. We're going to start with Ted Deutsch, who's going to talk to us about how to understand what this means in the diplomatic arena and how we might act accordingly to support Israel. So Ted, thank you for being here, of course, and for sharing with us.
Shira, thanks very much, and thanks to everyone for joining. It's an important moment to come together as a community, and I'm so grateful that all of our organizations have come together. I will talk just for a moment about the diplomatic arena and how we can support Israel there. Thankfully, at this point, the international response has been overwhelmingly supportive of Israel, its right to security, its right to defend itself. We know that's not always the case, and AJC has engaged in all of our offices around the world, and all of our representatives in countries around the world to make sure that officials don't slip into the both sidisms, that they recognize the barbarity of what's happened here, the brutality of what's happened, the immorality of what it means when we witness a pogrom, a massacre of the Jewish community. And we've seen powerful statements. I would mention only a few, our offices in Brussels in particular, reaching out, working with our friends at the EU and across the EU. The statement that the President of the European Commission put out on behalf of the 27 states of the EU, very, very powerful, making clear that Israel has the right to defend itself, and in the days to come, that the European Union stands with Israel, that it was defenseless people who were brutally murdered in cold blood on the streets. That's a quote from the president's statement. That's the kind of support that we've seen. It's incredibly important, and we've seen leaders of traditionally non-aligned countries stand in solidarity with Israel. We've seen the Prime Minister of India, really the unofficial leader of the global South, state very powerfully their support for Israel at this moment, and then we look at the symbols that point to what this all means. The fact that across the world, in Brussels and Prague and Berlin and Paris, not to mention Warsaw and Baku and Buenos Aires, governments have chosen to light up their government buildings, important buildings, in blue and white in support of Israel. This doesn't just happen, and we can't expect that it will continue. So the work that we do going forward is to ensure that we're speaking out and helping people understand what's going to happen in the days ahead. And the fact that the infrastructure that Hamas chose to build in Gaza was not schools and hospitals, that it was infrastructure to be used to advance its terrorist aims, the thousands and thousands of missiles that have rained down on Israel. And we go into this when we see already traditional anti-Israel voices in politics and on social media start to blame Israel for Hamas's pogrom, trying to justify the murder and kidnapping, slaughter of innocent Jews, and the desecration of bodies as some form of legitimate resistance. That's where we will all continue to speak out. We've seen this even in the United States with a planned rally in Times Square in support of Hamas and what we've seen. So how do we go forward and show up for Israel on the diplomatic front? Well, we need to ensure broad and unequivocal diplomatic support. And as I said, we don't take it for granted that it continues. We have to continue. We have to continue to make clear exactly what's happening here as this goes forward every single day over the coming days and weeks and months. We'll do it, AJC, through our 25 offices and 17 institutes, but we'll also need to show that the international Jewish community is absolutely united in our support for Israel. On a call that Eric and I were on earlier today with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it was made really clear to us that in Israel, obviously people are scared and the community is rattled, and we all acknowledge that there will be dark days ahead. The community needs to feel our love, and it's true from all of us in the United States, and it's true from the Jewish communities around the world that we're working with to help show that support, to make sure that their governments continue to hear from their Jewish communities, and to make sure that the people of Israel understand that the global Jewish community stands with them. The organized Jewish community and individuals of our own community are active in social media. They're active in telling people what's actually happening on the ground. This is true around the world. We can't overstate the importance of individuals posting real and accurate information at a time when there will be so many voices trying to pass along false information as accurate narrative. History has shown us, I'll just finish with this, Shira, and again, I thank you very much for the opportunity. History has shown us that violent anti-Semitic incidents increase when there's a flare-up of violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So as we go forward more than ever, we've got to work with local, state, and federal government officials. We will do that with our partners at the federations and our partners in Jewish communities all across the United States to ensure, and around the world, to ensure that they all understand the threat posed to Jewish communities, that they're working swiftly to ensure our community's security. And in the coming days, I look forward to being able to share more information. This is a moment that requires unity in our community. The fact that Eric at JFNA and so many organizations have joined here today is proof of that. This is what we need to do going forward. We're grateful to be a part of it, and we'll look forward to doing much more of this and holding our community together, even as we all stand together for Israel.
Thank you so much, Ted, for helping us understand the issues and especially for your last point about the importance of all of us staying together as a community to do this work in the days and weeks and months ahead. I am now going to invite Eric Fingerhut, the President and CEO of the Jewish Federations of North America, to talk more about how we can activate our communities back home and be advocates for Israel at this time, again, today, and then what that might look like over the next few weeks and months, because as we're hearing today, we're really just at the beginning.
Thank you, Shira. And I appreciate as much as my friend Ted Deutsch does the power of international organizations, of national organizations, of our national governments to affect change. But it's also important for us to remember that the cornerstone of Jewish life is and always has been our own local communities. It takes a community for us to join together in prayer. We mourn as a community, we celebrate as a community, we care for each other as a community. Rabbi Sachs of blessed memory said that community is the cornerstone, it is the microcosm of the Jewish people. So how we act in each of our communities is a microcosm of how the entire Jewish people will act. I'd like to suggest that there are two fundamental ways that each of our communities can act collectively to impact this incredible tragedy that we're facing and the challenge that's ahead of us as the Jewish people. First, as we always do, there are needs in Israel. We can stand with Israelis and we can help Israelis. Of course, we can reach out to our families and our friends who are suffering. And in Israel, the proportion, the numbers already of dead and injured proportionally is many, many times what the tragedy of 9/11 was to America. Everyone that I've spoken to here in Israel is impacted directly. We can reach out, we can show our love, we can show our caring. And yes, there are financial needs that families are going to have here. There's trauma, there's dislocation, there's destroyed homes, there's destroyed families. And our federations, of course, which I have the privilege of leading, as well as so many of our communal organizations, will be excellent conduits for all of us to provide the tzedakah, the resources that are necessary to help address immediately the challenges that are being faced by our Israeli brothers and sisters. But just as much as we can help Israelis in Israel, each and every community can help Israel at home. The fact is that the decision as to whether or not to support Israel as a broader civil community beyond the Jewish community is not made just by members of Congress in Washington or by the administration in Washington or in foreign capitals. It's made at home. It's made by the leadership of our local officials, of our mayors, of our city council people, of our state legislatures, of our governors. It's made by our business leaders. It's made by our civic leaders. It's made by the other religious and ethnic group leaders that in our communities. And they are going to respond to us. You live in their communities. We live in community together. We must reach out. We must explain why this horrendous terrorist attack is an affront to civilization and not just to the Jewish people. We must reach out and explain why the information that they're hearing on social media is wrong. We must explain why there's no moral equivalence to what's happened in Israel. And we must explain why Israel will have to and will respond militarily and with strength, and why this will take a long time, and why this isn't, as Ted said, as Yaakov said, a military battle across the Suez Canal, or in other respects, this is in fact a terrorist organization that has seized control of a community in Gaza and is going to need to be dislodged from it. And the society, our nation, and our communities are going to have to support Israel as they do it. That comes from our individual contacts and our individual relationships that we must lift up, and that we must reach out, and that we must explain and that we must stay in contact throughout this event, which is going to continue for quite a long time. Our communities will be a microcosm of how the entire nation responds. Let us be leaders in our communities. Our Jewish federations will, of course, provide all the support and help we can, together with all the organizations that have come together on this call, and I thank them all for participating together. Let us together join as a community to make sure that the civil society in which we live is supportive of everything that we are doing. The philosopher Emil Fackenheim talked about how there are epoch-making events that transform the course of history. And it's through these transformative events that we feel ourselves addressed and summoned, breaking through into history. Let's break through into history. Let's not allow what we know will happen, the opposition and the negativity that will come from social media. Let's not allow that to capture our communities. Let us lead our communities to be in the right place as we move forward and support Israel as they address this existential challenge.
Thank you so much, Eric, for your remarks, and really to all of our panelists for everything that you've told us. I want to get everybody back on screen for a moment. We're going to field a couple of questions to our panelists before we close out, and I'm going to ask, trying to consolidate from the many, many questions that we've gotten. I'm going to start with, I think, some of the most pressing questions that relate to the facts on the ground. So Avital, if you're still here, and Yaakov, we can turn to, we'll start with Avital and Yaakov. First, just to clarify so people understand, we're getting some questions about, are there ongoing hostage situations still happening in Israel? Can you distinguish between what's happening in Israel versus what's happening in Gaza? And then a lot of questions about the likelihood of, Avital, you touched on this a little bit, about Hezbollah entering the fight and how we should be thinking about that as of this moment. Avital, if you want to start, and then Yaakov, you can add.
Sure. So yesterday there were more than 20 sites in which hundreds of armed Hamas infiltrated and butchered as many people as they could, carrying some of the bodies with them back to Gaza, and others just leaving behind, just dead on the streets. Currently, there are 6 places with ongoing exchange of fire between Israeli security forces and Hamas operatives. This has been going on for almost 48 hours, or 36 hours rather, more than 36 hours. So you can imagine how well prepared these Hamas terrorists came in and how much munition they have. There were some successes with negotiation teams. We have special negotiation teams. For example, there is a kibbutz on the border with Gaza called Be'eri, and there was a group of 50 kibbutz members who gathered in the dining room for a very long time. There was negotiations with the attackers, with the terrorists, which, thank God, actually ended in a good way, and they were released. There were other casualties in Be'eri, but in this specific case, the negotiations succeeded. So right now there are 6 places like that. But it's even more complicated, Belle, because the security forces are moving from one house to another, looking for the terrorists hiding. And imagine a community can have 100 houses, but a city like Sderot with 30,000 people has a lot more, obviously. So this takes a long time. That's the reason this is still taking place. That's the reason why we are still seeing terrorists in some of the communities. As for the second part of the question regarding Hezbollah, Iran is pressuring Hezbollah to enter this vicious circle of blood, of terror, of attacking Israel. Hezbollah, due to this pressure, actually this morning fired 17 mortar shells to a few IDF outposts in the Mount Dov region. This is on the border with Syria, next to the Hermon mountain. And basically, this stopped after that. The question remains whether Hezbollah will cave into the pressure of Iran and continue to act. As you know, Lebanon has a lot to lose. It's on a failed state. It has 4 hours of electricity a day, no medicine, huge poverty. The people there are suffering already for the past 3 years. So they have a lot to lose. But as we know, the rationale here doesn't always play a central role. Ideology sometimes overcomes the rationale and putting the people in the first place. And so I think the next, I would say 12 hours will be critical to understand where we're heading.
Thank you. Yaakov, please, anything you want to add?
Avital did a great job. I think that the one point I'll just add, which I think is important for understanding what Israelis are going through right now. And Avital said this just about her own experience, and I told you about my family. I think there's not a single Israeli today in this country who does not know someone who was killed, who does not know someone who was abducted, and who does not know someone who was killed and abducted, right? 1,000 people dead around, and the numbers are still going to increase, and over 100 taken into Gaza. It is a number that it's your neighbor's kid, it's your friend, it's someone you work with, it's someone you were in the army with. I have a friend here whose son, an American Israeli, has been taken. It's something that touches each and every Israeli person today. No one is immune. It's not a bus that blew up somewhere, God forbid, but we remember those days. This is something that touches everyone in the country. And that's why there's this almost paralyzing feeling for so many Israelis today of what's happening in the country.
Thank you both so much. Really, thank you. I want to bring in now Ted. Ted, we're getting a bunch of questions following up on the U.S. role in all of this, and particularly about Congress, because of course there are questions around not having a Speaker of the House, what Congress can do to support Israel, renewed Iron Dome funding. Tell us what your perspective is in terms of all of this and next steps.
Sure. First of all, no one knows what the answer is when it comes to what Congress can do, because we've never had a moment where Congress has kicked out a speaker. These are uncharted waters. But what we do know from the efforts of lots of organizations in our community and a lot of phone calls and conversations I've had with my former colleagues is that the support that we're seeing is, I think, unprecedented, Democrats and Republicans alike. And it's important for us, as is the case on the rest of the issues we've raised, it's important for us to make sure that members of Congress continue to understand what the truth is as we go forward here. So we don't know how they're going to do that, but we do know from the statement from the president, the statement from the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State, that in all of those instances, they made clear their commitment to Israel having what it needs to defend itself. Our work in the community across the country is to make sure that our local members of Congress understand that as well. We've seen just today an announcement by the Secretary of Defense that the USS Harry S. Truman group will be moving toward Israel as a show of strength. That's a very important statement also as it relates to Iran, and is consistent with the president's speech yesterday about no other countries should think that this is an opportunity for them to take advantage of, a statement directed very clearly at the Iranians. And I think sending this Air Force group, this naval group and the aircraft carrier send that strong signal. So we have to continue to do this work. And as Eric said, the most important place this gets done is across the country. Every member of Congress is responsible to the people that send him or her to Washington. Every state legislator has a role to play. Every mayor has a role to play. So we join with JFNA and the federations and the work that they do, and in our 25 regional offices, the relationships that we've developed. We partner with JFNA, with the federations, with ADL, with other organizations at the local level. It's really important for us to continue to spread the truth to our elected officials about what's actually happening. And I think this is a really good opportunity. Before I turn it back to you, Bella, first I want to clarify. I think I want to be clear. It's the USS Gerald R. Ford, I believe, that's moving to Israel. But I want to tell Avital in front of this whole group how proud, Avital, we at AJC are of you and the work that you do. But really, all of us on this Zoom today, in very large numbers, understand how important it is to stand with Israel, but that ultimately this is very personal, as Yaakov just said. And to you, Avital, and to your family and to those serving with you, we offer our prayers and our strength and our support. And Yaakov, the best thing that we can do to help people understand what this means to the Jewish community is to help them understand how personal it is for Israelis, and finally, how personal it is for all of us. So many of us on this call have friends, co-workers, acquaintances, people that have had the same kind of experience that you have. We know people who have lost loved ones, whose loved ones have been taken captive, and we stand with you as well and with the people of Israel. It's important that both of you understand how much all of us on this Zoom feel, and I want to express that support. Belle, thanks very much.
Of course, Ted, thank you for all that you're doing as well, of course. And Eric, let me turn to you for our final question. We're getting a bunch of questions in the chat on how we turn support for Israel really locally, because of course, as what always happens when there's a situation in Israel, a conflict, we start to see demonstrations. We're seeing one in New York today, they're happening around the country. What should our response be as a community? What's JFNA doing? What are we partnering on with other organizations?
Thank you, Belle. First of all, a large number of communities have already scheduled solidarity events, vigils. I encourage these. They are an important start. What's especially important about them is not just that everyone who's listening show up, though that is important, and I'll say another word about that in a moment, but that we reach out to others in our community to join us. We call our friends who lead other nonprofits inside and outside the Jewish community. We call religious leaders that we know of other faiths. We call our local city council people and our mayors and our state legislators, and we ask them to come and to join us. And we thank them for coming, and we acknowledge them being there. And then after it's over, we follow up with them, and we ask them if they have any questions, and we stay in touch with them, and we keep them briefed. These are incredibly important components of the work. I know Ted addressed very importantly the power of social media. He's so right. On the other hand, the only thing more powerful than social media is the direct conversation between neighbors, between people who work together but come from different backgrounds and different faiths, between organizations who interact with each other on other issues and can speak about this issue. These are critical things to do. I do want to make sure, because we've heard this from a number of sources, and Ted, I think, also alluded to this earlier, that of course we're concerned about security. For those who are not aware, our Jewish Federation system is in the middle of a major effort to ensure that every Jewish community has a professional security initiative with a professional community security director who's in touch with every single institution of Jewish life, and also with the local police and law enforcement at all levels. So your community, most likely, there are now 95 of these efforts across North America. Your community most likely has a Jewish communal security initiative. We will mobilize those to make sure that these rallies are safe and communities are protected. Local law enforcement will be there, local police to protect and support. We cannot allow the fear of counter protesters or the risk to keep us from gathering together as a community and to keep us from bringing together our friends and neighbors across faith boundaries and across communal boundaries. This is how we begin to build the support that Israel will need in the coming weeks, months, and years.
Let me jump back in, and I know we're getting ready to close, and I'm so grateful in a moment to turn it over to our friend and teacher, Rabbi David Wolpe, to help us close out today's webinar. I just wanted to take another opportunity to say thank you to everyone here, everyone who's joined us on the webinar, our speakers and partners. We've received many questions about whether this is being recorded and whether we will share it, and the answer is yes to both. It's been recorded. We will share it, including that very painful video at the top of the call. We've been asked if that will be shared, and we will. So stay tuned for that, and please be in touch at any time if we can be helpful with anything. You can be in touch with JFNA, with AJC, and I know, I'm sure I speak for all of our partners here who are actively engaged in this work, who want to be resources and available to others in the community. So let's stay coordinated and together in the days, weeks, and months ahead. And with that, Rabbi Wolpe, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you. I want to speak about our religious obligations now, and I want to give you 4 religious obligations that Jews have in the wake of this unfathomable tragedy. The first is the obligation of memory. We have to remember what happened and not let the world forget, and not forget ourselves as our daily lives begin day after day to make insistent demands upon us, because this is a wound that will not heal any time in the near or perhaps even far future. And allied to that obligation of memory is an obligation of testimony. We cannot let the world evade or elide or forget the barbarity and the cruelty and the inhumanity of the enemies of Israel, what they did, what they sought to do, what they hoped to do, and what they would do again if given the chance. We must be witnesses, and we must give testimony. And third, we have an obligation of solidarity. Let the people of Israel know that they are not alone, not only through giving our resources to those charities, those tzedakah that have ways of helping heal and helping bolster the people whose lives have been shattered, but also by reaching out, whether it's by text or phone call or email, just to let them know that they are in our minds and in our hearts. And then finally, we're Jews. We have an obligation of prayer. And so I'd like to offer a prayer, first in Hebrew, and then I'll give a brief translation in English, that we offer together to all of those that we think of and remember today. Achenu ve'achiotenu kol Beit Yisrael hanatunim b'tzara u'b'shivya ha'omdim bein bayam u'bein bayabasha hamakom yirachem etchem v'yotziem mitzara l'revacha me'afela la'ora u'mishiabud l'geula hashta b'agala u'zman kariv v'nomar amen. Dear God, we pray that you help us to comfort and heal those who have lost, and those who are wounded, and those who are hurt. And may you help the forces of Israel recover those who have been taken captive and restore them from darkness to light and from imprisonment to freedom, speedily and in our day. Amen.